Hi, I'm Margie from Marjorie's Candies, and what I made today is coffee cake. This is Swedish Tea Ring, and I made this because it was a new year, and I made one of them. I made a double recipe. Okay, so all through this whole video, I'm putting together a double recipe. So if you know you only want to make like a Swedish tea ring and not the pretzel, then you can cut the recipe in half. Okay, so every time I mention an ingredient, it's going to be for the double recipe. Now this whole process is going to take about 20 minutes of video, and I've cut it into two different parts. So if you want to find the two different videos, you would look for Marjorie's Candies Swedish Tea Ring 1, Part 1, and Marjorie's Candies Swedish Tea Ring Part 2. So I'm going to start off this video, Part 1, by showing you the ingredients. I'm going to talk to you about the ingredients while I'm doing it. I really didn't list them up front. So I'm going to start by heating up some milk. I don't know if you can tell, but this is starting to come to a simmer, little teeny bubbles. That's what you want to do. This is 1½ cups of milk. To that 1½ cups of milk, I'm going to add some sugar. This is ½ cup of sugar. And then I'm going to add some salt. This is 2 teaspoons of salt. We'll give that a little stir. Really all I want to do here is cool this milk down so I can use it in the dough. So I'm going to add some butter to that. This is about, it's actually 2/3 of a cup of butter, and that will really help to cool it down, because you want this milk to be at a very comfortable temperature for the yeast, so it should be very warm to the touch. I just transferred the milk mixture into a glass container in order to try to cool it down a little further, because my pots have a pretty heavy bottom, and they'll actually keep the liquid hot for a long time. Here I have a nice large bowl, because I've doubled this recipe, and I'm going to need a lot of room to stir the flour in. Now you can dissolve the yeast directly into the bowl you're going to mix your flour. Now I've just made this water. It's ½ cup of water, and I've made it really very hot, but probably way hotter than it needs to be. But when you pour it into your bowl, okay, and give it a little shake, if you feel it, that's still a little bit hot. We'll wait just a moment. So the water is now a really nice temperature, just warm to the touch. Now, I have 2 packages of yeast here, and I guess that's 2 tablespoons. And what you want to always do is really check your yeast. Make sure that that the date on the back is correct. Now this one says January 2013, and it is January 1st, 2012 today. So we'll go ahead and what I want to do is just sprinkle it in. Okay, and just let it sit. Here are 4 eggs that I'm going to beat up, and I'm going to place them in the microwave just to warm them a little bit so I can incorporate them into the dough. But be very careful not to cook them. Just warm them up in the microwave. Okay, so now the yeast is ready, and I've warmed up my eggs, so I'm just going to add them. And I've also got the milk mixture and the sugar. I'm just going to give that a little stir. And I'm going to add, this is 8 cups of flour, which is what the entire recipe calls for. So I'm going to work with that flour that I've measured. Okay. I'm going to use a whisk just to get this in. Then I'll change over to the wooden spoon. If you start in the center and work your way out, it helps get the flour in. And I'm going to stop at this point after I get this flour in and let it sit for about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to add the rest of the flour, and then we'll knead it. And I'm also going to cover this with a piece of saran wrap, just to keep the top from getting dry. Okay, so now the yeast has rested for a little while, the dough's rested, and you can see the bubbles. So what I'm going to do is add a little bit more, and it actually looks like the 8 cups I started with that the recipe called for is probably not going to be quite enough. But we'll add some more. When you let it rest, the flour will absorb into the dough, so you wouldn't really need as much. Okay, so it's going into it, and we're going to pour this out onto the table and let it rest again for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll knead it. So let me just put a little bit more flour in here, and it's okay if it doesn't all go in, because I'll dump it onto the table and we'll cover it and we'll come back in 10 minutes and it'll be ready. Okay. I'm not even going to really put more, I'll put a little bit more flour down, because there is a lot of flour in the dough still that hasn't really gone in. Okay, and don't even worry about scraping the bowl. Now I'm going to wash that bowl out, because we're going to, after I knead the dough, I'm going to put it back into this bowl. So I'm going to cover it with the saran wrap that I just used. It's going to be ecologically sound and not use more. And we'll come back in 10 minutes. Allowing the dough to rest is a very good idea. Okay, at this point, it's ready to knead. And what I do is I use the stock scraper to help me, because this dough is a little bit sticky still. So that helps, and I will definitely need more flour, but it sort of helps just to get it started. We'll add a little bit more. Now I added about a cup more flour to this container. I started off with exactly what the recipe called for, and we still may have that left. The dock scraper really helps to save flour. It is pretty sticky, so. I have some nuts on the table, so probably that's what you're seeing. I was chopping the pecans for this. Okay, so once you sort of get it started like that, you can use it, just knead normally. That helps. Using a dock scraper really helps you to save flour. You don't want this to be a tough, heavy dough. See how nice and soft it is. You don't need to use it again. Now I'm going to knead this for about 10 minutes, and I'll be back to show you what it looks like when it's done. I also scrape off the table and also move those over. Add a little more fresh flour to that. All these little things help you to keep from adding too much flour as you're going along, okay? This dough is now ready to put into the bowl, but before I do that, what I want to do is I want to put a little bit of oil into the bowl and spread it around all up the sides. And I'm going to drop this in upside down, wiggle it around a little bit, and then flip it over. Okay, and then we're going to cover it again. This is when it will cover for probably until it's double at least, and that could be a good hour.